And we're very lucky to have an international superstar who's done an incredible amount of infrastructure work in building research capability in Chinese education, and has worked extensively with PISA, and has a huge long history working not only with IPPE, but long before that, even before there was a self center. So definitely a long history. And so it's, and KT is not only a very interesting researcher because of the breadth of things that he's doing, but also very much a personal friend as well. So it's really nice to be able to bring personal friends in that have interesting things to tell us. So I'm not going to go on any further than that, but looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. It's really a family gathering. I remember 20 years ago, Herb told me it's a gold mine here, using these large data sets, including PISA and high school and beyond and all those. So it's a family reunion back 20 years ago when some of the younger students here are still in their primary school probably. Okay, let me share things, not necessarily confidential, but things that I hear in different committee meetings. So there's always some quotes that in PISA, Andreas, the main person in charge of PISA, Andreas Schleicher, he always quotes, so in God we trust, so everyone have to bring data. And we understand if you want to study gender, you can't study on girls' school only. So similarly, if you want to understand how Australia or how Hong Kong is doing, you can't do it with one country or one economy, because you don't know whether the things you find are unique things or common things across all countries or economies. But there are great difficulty in doing cross-cultural, cross-nations, cross-economy comparison. Great challenge. We'll share some of it that we talk every day in the meetings. So in PISA, and probably all of you know, so I can skip some of this slide very quickly. They start in year 2000, and then every 3-year cycle, but I'll tell you that they're thinking about 4-year cycle now. And we were talking about countries that participate. You have to bring in electricity to a sample school. So you have to drive 2 days to reach a school and bring your electricity. Now they are talking about countries that you have to walk 3 days, bringing in your whatever things in your pack bag, and then walk 3 days to reach a school in order to get a sample school. So everyone are joining, even the very undeveloped place in the world. So the last cycle is 2018. So theoretically is 2021, but due to the COVID, now is shifted 1 year later is 2022, and then another 3 years later. But we are certain until, next year. So we are still talking about 2025. So it's 3 years after 2022, which is a coming cycle. But then we are less certain. We'll be more certain in about a year time whether we'll do it 4 year or 3 year. So the last in the last few cycle, 3 or 4 cycle, we have an innovative domain. We talk about global competence in 2018. So it's creative thinking in 2022, and then we will have assessing students' IT literacy as an innovative domain in 2025 or 2026. So it's 15 years old across all countries. A lot of countries. Probably most people, we can just name 40 countries, and then but it's far beyond. So we talk about in Finland, These are the story that we share in the meeting. There's Finland has been doing very well, become world famous because of the PISA. And in the old days, everyone think that the Nordic countries are similar, but until Finland outperformed all others. And the education minister in Sweden actually was the PISA national project manager at the time. She said she cried in the office because they found that they were doing so badly. And the difference is that Sweden has a system that allows about half of the school being private, whereas in Finland, almost all schools, practically all schools, are government run. So they are talking about if it's all government run, then everyone will be paying more quickly attention to the education system. And so what the graph shown is that if you are putting in more money per head into your education, and there's a rise. So money helps. But once you reach around 50,000 US dollar for that period, 6 to 15 age, if you are spending more than that amount, then it is flattened. The curve is not a rising curve anymore. It's how do you spend the money is more important than how much. So you can name a lot of countries who are spending a lot, but their academic results are not any better than those spending less money. So there are lots of data showing that, or showing the importance of this study, PISA. And for people who are less familiar, PISA assess skills that are useful, important when students grow up. So now they, instead of using long passages, they have small passages, for example. So these are the passage testing assessment on reading. And this is our first article. So we assess and tell everyone that the PISA instrument is very useful. So Herb and I wrote the first article, and we published a lot on PISA. These are the PISA article. And now I'm in the technical advisory committee. So OECD don't have that kind of expertise. So they set up a group to supervise how ETS did their work. Actually, ETS is doing a lot of good work. And I'm in the questionnaire expert group. So I'll be talking things, but these are public information. I'll be sharing you with public information. Though all countries saw our reports written, presented to the country manager. I'm also in the questionnaire group, in the PISA questionnaire group, as well as recently I also joined the TIMSS questionnaire group. So I can share with you public information that I pay attention to, the difference between these two questionnaire groups. And then I'm helping the PISA and the teams running in Hong Kong. I'm also the PISA strategic manager. So they have a group deciding big things like how many years will PISA run for each cycle. And then I'm also in the OECD group helping Korea to write a reform paper. And then I don't know whether you heard of that. There's an OECD 2030 project going on, and I'm in the consultant team.
And KT, why
yes?
don't you have any? Why is it you don't have any time to continue to write articles?
That was a joke.
Yes, I am doing too much committee work, but it's interesting. I mean, it's eye-opening to see how really questionnaire come up, to see what they have done. So in terms of the knowledge, again, actually using those kind of knowledge, helping the countries in this or the cities with this region to set up their questionnaire and to set up the system. So I don't know whether you know that PISA actually is will be launching soon an assessment on English as a second language. So Greek want to compare how Greek students are doing as compared with Spanish students doing in the English, for example, and versus Japanese students. So this is a coming project. So these are the things I've been doing, and I'm helping various cities or country level kind of system assessment. And there are two things, actually, there are two things PISA talk on, a rank table. So they talk about which country is doing better than the others. And we understand mainland China has been doing quite well. It started with Shanghai, but now there's two provinces and 2 cities. And the population size is half the US population size. So it's very huge population in China participating in, other than the Macau, Hong Kong, Taipei, there are a huge size of students. So they are countryside students participating, and they're still doing very well. Of course, one of the main problems probably in China they want to solve is that the students are spending a lot of time on study. So this is a league table. And the second thing they talk about is excellence and equity. So equity is the thing they look close at. So you can see their countries. So the XY coordinate is equity and score. So you can see in the report they pay attention to which country is doing. So Macau has been doing quite well in equity. Hong Kong has been doing quite well in terms of results and equity. And then mainland China has been doing quite well in result, but the equity is sort of world average. And US is doing average on equity. Singapore has been doing very well, but in terms of equity, probably Singapore has an early streaming system. So they stream students very young. Probably that is one of the reasons that the equity is not that good, because the younger you screen the student, the better is rely on SES. So the general knowledge is that SES is more strongly related to exam results when you are young. I think that's a general conclusion. In TIMSS, so I think most of you are familiar with the PISA reports, those 5 volumes, 6 volumes, 7 volumes of big report. And in TIMSS, they pay more attention on the comparison in the change of academic standard. So in the report, you don't find that much of thematic chapters on different issues, but you find a lot of your growth, your change in academic results, across years. And for questionnaire, we understand, I'll show in a minute, I'll show how frequent PISA have been changing their questionnaire. But for TIMSS, they're changing much less frequently, but they don't present your change in the item results, itemized questionnaire, itemized result every year. But countries or participating cities are encouraged to do their own comparison, which in a minute I would share with you. Sometimes it's quite problematic to compare across years. Okay, we'll talk about a few important issues, trends. So to the public, everyone are assuming that the whole project is assessing, monitor a trend. One basic principle, if you measure change, you cannot change the instrument. This is a basic, and everyone talk about that. I'll show you in a minute that I don't think that they take it very seriously. So in the old days, we said riding horse is important, but now IT skill. So there's no way you can equate, even using equating, you can equate the important skill across years. So what I'm arguing is that assuming you have all these equating techniques, but if you are changing the things that you are measuring, there's no way you can equate. There's no way you can talk about trend. But then, which is more important? We insist on measuring trend, or do we change the important skill? I think there's somewhat changing. Of course, I'm dichotomizing. I think PISA is assessing on important skill. They pay more attention on important skill, whereas in TIMSS, they pay more attention to trends. So your choice, which is the better direction. And for example, in longer, this is easier to equate. Longer essay in earlier days. Now they are talking about shorter essays. But for this, for reading, then you can still equate. And PISA, which make PISA attractive, is the innovative domain. So we talk about creativity, and all the creativity experts in the world will ask, how can you measure creativity? It's extremely difficult. So PISA actually take a lead in measuring all the things that no one know how to measure. But then it becomes very important. I'll use an example like blood pressure. Blood pressure is important, but we understand that blood pressure, you measure it in the morning, in the afternoon, when you have different moods in the day, then probably blood pressure changes a lot. But the important thing is that PISA make everyone aware of the importance of blood pressure. I think that's the kind of thing. And if everyone are talking about blood pressure, then your health will change. So, of course, this is my interpretation of the situation. So PISA helped the world in education by alerting different people the importance of the different innovative domains. So PISA become the topic everyone talk about at not just education minister level, is at the prime minister level that everyone talk about PISA. So Andres Schleicher, the mastermind behind PISA, is actually discussing, because all the prime minister want education is an important thing in a country. So everyone want to listen. What have we learned about a certain country from the PISA result? So they're changing. PISA actually changed a lot. This is PISA own review. If you read their own report in 2012, they compare the 70 constructs they measure in the first 4 waves, and their conclusion is none were used in the 4 waves, and then 55 were used once. So the constancy they keep is change. So the only thing that they haven't changed is nothing permanent except change. So we said that penmanship perhaps at a certain stage is important, but do we still assess penmanship? And there's also an issue. If you have 20 constructs, I think around the world, when we talk about educational monitoring, then all the education minister will ask you, please give me a list of 20 important things that we should monitor. And to a lot of educators, they think that it works. And in a lot of countries, they think it works. But if we put it in the research project like PISA, if you talk about the 20 things that you talk in each wave, then gradually no one will look at your project, because you are talking about the same old things that you talk each cycle. So if you're talking the importance of breakfast, for example, breakfast is actually affecting a lot, 0.5 standard deviation effect size. But you talk about breakfast each cycle, so no one will read your report. Not too confidential. You can compare the PISA report. So in each cycle, if you read the report, the ultimate concern, the main concern, they're asking themselves and they're writing the report. They said, what kind of additional message will we be putting in the report? So they're talking about new things they want to put in. They don't want to talk about, for example, efficacy, bullying. They'll talk in one report. But if next year they have nothing new about bullying, they don't want to write it again. I think that is the basic principle they have been talking about. And if they're not writing in, they hate to see the same questionnaire being put there every year. So these are the things that you don't have new message. They try to avoid it, and there's also the mindset behind some of these item writer. Attitude. We have an attitude achievement paradox. So what it means is that we find that assumingly, all these instruments are measuring important positive things we want our students to have. But interestingly, across country or across groups, we find that students, for example, one research that we cite a lot is back in 1966, we already find that a minority group may have very strong interest, but the academic result is very poor. So we, in the PISA report, you can see that they are quoting Herb's frame effect to explain all this. And there are also difficulty in comparing the use of scale across cultures. So So they developed a technique with net, and Herb can ask the friend Matthias to come and talk about this. Basically, they ask you, they give you standard scenario, so everyone will rate this scenario, a standard scenario, and depending on how you use the rating scale, then we adjust all the other items using a few stories, which is found not to be very useful. So we have abandoned that method basically and there's a whole, if you are interested, there's a whole volume on comparability of international data. They held it just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they held a special conference, all technical people. So they are talking about IRT approach, different approach, but I don't see any common method being developed. So one thing that we learned at least, and we also pay very great attention to, is that we try to use informational and behavioral. So instead of asking, do you like reading? We ask information. How many hours do you read each day? And do you read different types of books? So we find indicator that reflect your behavior and information. So you can find this is no longer strongly agree, strongly disagree kind. It is information. How many days do you have breakfast? We do not ask students, we have frequent breakfast. No, we don't use this kind of strongly agree, strongly disagree to item like I have frequent breakfast. We don't do that. We try to ask how many days or do you have breakfast yesterday? So that kind of item. Actually, they've used the do you have breakfast, which of the following items have you done yesterday, including one item on breakfast. It doesn't work well because this is yes or no. But on average, across a country, then it probably reflects the level of the country, but it is not a good indicator of a student. So I would strongly advise all students who are doing research, try to develop informational and behavioral items as much as possible. Forget your Likert scale. but TIMSS, I mean, TIMSS is difficult because TIMSS has a long history of using Likert scale, as well as on most major instruments, psychological instruments. Then we are stuck there. If you want to keep your instrument and want to change all into informational item, then you lost all your trends. That's the difficult. But PISA is less concerned about trend. They are developing a new set of items, so it's easier. So I would strongly advise that, if possible, build up indicators on behavior and on information. For example, why readership is a good indicator of reading. To read different types of books. This reflects better than I like reading books. I like reading books, agree, strongly agree, don't disagree. It may not help much because of the frame. I mean, as I will show in a minute, that students actually compare their behavior against their classmate, or at least in a neighborhood. So the frame affects a lot. So by asking information, we try to minimize the frame effect. So comparing slope across economy is probably better, or comparing slope across school probably sometimes work better than comparing the means across different countries. How did PISA try out? PISA actually in the pilot, they try out at least twice the amount of numbers and they drop out. So if you want to assess bullying, they will have at least twice the number of construct. They'll try out different things. But the difficulty is that we can't modify the items. So after the pilot, we can either take it or leave it. We can't change a few words in the item thinking that we're improving. Actually, we don't know. So by looking at the item characteristic, they will decide which construct to select and which to drop out. But we are removing around one half. And 4 to 5, or as a student or as a young scholar, We are trained to use 5-point scale, but then we saw PISA and TIMSS are using 4, and we think this is a golden standard now. Everyone are using 4 and 5, but actually, at least in PISA, they're still revisiting all these issues, 4 and 5. My hunch is that 4 or 5 work out better. Depends much on the items and the point you are using. And generally, we think that more points are discriminating, and odd number of points sometimes are not good because students try to use the middle point, and all these different issues. But if you're using informational item, because you'll be asking once a day, several times in a week, several times in a month, then it naturally becomes more or different to 5 points. You have some natural points that varies across items. And wording effect, we are alert of that, but we don't have good solution. So people complain about, or at least in the meeting, we are concerned about all items are positive. But sometimes for construct, you can hardly find negative worded item because this can be not natural. And students may not be reading them carefully. But it's also good because we can find out inconsistency in the student answer. If they all put 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 or 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 across, then we can identify this student. PISA by itself, it did not rule out all these students. So researchers have to identify all these students who are not assessing, not trying their best in answering the items. One thing that probably you have to alert is that in the coming PISA, so we understand in the cognitive part, in the achievement part, they're using an adaptive, multi-stage adaptive. So if you are doing well, then you are given more difficult items. Wait, there's a thing that we learned in computerized adaptive testing. We have that technology back at least 20 years ago in high-stake public exam adaptive assessment. So we can do the same thing to PISA cognitive. But actually, the results show that if we do adaptive assessment for large-scale assessment, which we don't care about individual student result, actually the gain in benefit is minimal. This is one thing that I sit there and something new to me. We always advocate you should use adaptive testing for ability, but actually it turns out if you are assessing a country, if you use itemized adaptive kind of strategies, it won't help a lot. But more difficult is that a lot every 9 years you change the assessment items a lot. So math construct will be changing every 3 cycles. Math construct. So you have a lot of math new math item, but you don't have the characteristic. If you don't have the characteristic, so basically you can't administer an adaptive test during the assessment. So we are also stuck there. So what they're doing is that they use the pilot study to build up some sort of preliminary characteristic and use a semi-adaptive. And one thing that is difficult is that if you are fully adaptive kind of strategies, then you have a matrix of item parameter, which are quite a cluster. I mean, the high ability students are doing all the high ability more difficult items. So the matrix is not that balanced good enough that we can establish the parameters of the item fairly stably. So we are stuck there. We want different ability students. Yes, Herb?
Have they published research on this adaptive testing? Because that one's really quite an interesting one, and I understand why it makes much more difference at the individual student level. But I'm surprised, given the focus on relatively short tests, that it doesn't also make at least a discernible difference for the L2 and L3 levels, as the school and country levels.
Actually, if we talk about history, which is also in the public, they have published paper on the PISA adaptive. At least they have technical reports. But back like 10 years ago, they have been talking about adaptive adaptive testing in the cognitive part of PISA, but there's no good solution. They work out, and even in NAEP, I think you'll be surprised to know PISA is the first large-scale study using adaptive technique. So they talk to the NAEP people, and they're the most senior statistician in the world, and they share knowledge, and they try out do a lot of pilots, and they find that the gain is so minimal. But they're stuck there in the PISA system is that if you don't have the item parameters before you can't do it adaptively. But even if you have preliminary items and you administer the test adaptively, then you have the high ability student doing a certain cluster of items, and the low ability student doing, you don't have mix enough. So you have to run another independent study, asking your high ability student to do the low difficult items, which make the whole thing a mess. You have minimal. So in the adaptive multi-stage adaptive assessment we are doing with PISA now, actually is a semi-efficient, not the most efficient kind of adaptive. So the gain is talking about a few percent. So there are two things. First is that for large-scale assessment, the efficiency, even at school level, the efficiency is not that high. Second thing is that we are stuck with, we don't have an item bank building process before the actual measurement. So we are stuck with that kind of thing. Actually, at the end of this year, if we can fly, they have a conference talking about a new kind of adaptive assessment. So they want the academic to go to come together and discuss whether there are improvements that can be done. Okay, and now we're talking the items, the questionnaire items. So adaptive, you can shorten the number of time with the same efficiency. You can shorten the scale of tests. So we talk, can we shorten it? For the questionnaire, we talk about it, and then they do some pilots. So in 2022, they will be using not adaptive, but they were using some of the items. So not all students will be answering question 1 for a certain scale. So some will answer 1, 3, 5, 7, 8. So it's 5 out of 8 in a certain scale, for example. The difficult thing is that then you don't have, if you want to build your own scale or subscore, then you'll find that not all the students have the response for the certain item. So this is the thing that we have to take care of. The new thing, they try to put in more construct. I think PISA is very aggressive. They want to put in a lot of construct, so they want to shorten the scale. And on design, so I'm changing from the questionnaire to the design. Everyone knows that cross-sectional data cannot use it to talk about causal relation. And everyone will, once they join the PISA, they'll say, can we do longitudinal? So once in a few years, people will talk about that. I think these people are usually ignorant of the complication involved. Because now, even at this stage, 3-year cycle is a huge burden on even the administrative ETS, as well as in many countries. So it's a huge burden. So they're talking about, because 3-year cycle actually is a 5-year cycle. You have to start the work 5 years ago before the actual assessment, and then you have to write reports. So you're busy every day. You are cooking your dinner, lunch, and breakfast. You spend all the time in the kitchen, and you are extremely busy preparing different dishes all day. So they want reduce it to 4 years. The decision will be made in about a year time. And next year, around this time, we'll know whether they change it. They are talking about a country with very low SES. So they talk about a good indicator in assessing low SES. So the question I learned, interestingly, is you ask, is your toilet inside the house or outside of the house? It's a good SES indicator. So these are the good things that is expanding huge around. one thing I also learned is that we try to, because PISA want to inform teaching. So we talk about the good best teaching strategies. We want to link still teachers' behavior to student behavior. But if you can publish on that, I would strongly advise supervisor and student not to take up those topics. The difficulty is that we know some of the background is that not all the teachers participate. So it's 19 economies, and these are not necessarily the biggest one. So sometimes it is sort of middle and even low level, less developed country participating. So there are less number of countries. You don't have 79 countries in doing the teacher questionnaire. The second thing is that an parent questionnaire, but we know this. So for things that important things, we always try to ask the student to respond. So we are researchers. We force in all important items. So the best thing we can do, or the best topic, is usually using the student questionnaire as much as possible. But the most important thing is that the teacher framework, when we are selecting teacher, this is not a representative sample of the teachers in the school, nor of the country. So you went for whatever analysis we are doing is actually not representative. And the more difficult thing is that we haven't asked the teachers at 14. So whatever you ask about the current teachers may not be the most important thing affecting the student. So this make this kind of research impractical. But although we ask, so we can talk about the mean average of the country very carefully. But you want to link the teacher behavior to the student achievement. This is very flimsy. I would strongly advise to avoid this kind of research question. And we'll talk in a minute. And actually, most questionnaire items are like 5% between school, at least at most 10%. So there's huge variation within school and very small difference across school, which we usually want to talk about school behavior, which is difficult. And then there's also one thing that people try to alert is that the mean of correlation is not equal to the correlation of mean, which we'll show later. So at different level, the correlation actually means different things. And we are shifting our conclusion from different reports jumping around. In this section of my presentation, I'll just very quickly show things that we take it for granted. We talk less about, but which actually is important, and which also show the limitation of the research. For example, we talk about student meaning of life, and we find that mainland China students actually have a difficult time, and then they find life very meaningful. And US students although perform badly, but they find life meaningful. So probably it's the country economic state or the trend in their economy which affects more than the students' school behavior. And life satisfaction, you can find that it's not Asian versus Eastern kind of family. You can find that the graph is not a systematic differences between Eastern and Western. And actually, if you plot all the country together, is a negative relation between life satisfaction and high achievement. So, except there are only two countries which show exception is Finland and Estonia. There's no other third exception. So we always think there's a Western Asian division. This is a joke. Actually, the Western, you have just two countries, and you can see that USA and England, UK are actually quite low. So there are things that we talk about without data. That teacher support, for example, we think that smaller class size is good. And in mainland China, the class size is huge. Sometimes in the smaller places, you talk about class size of 70 students, but they said that their teachers are providing good support. So these are the things that you can't understand. I mean, you can't use, so data is actually important. We talk about sense of belonging. So you can see that the division is not West against East. We are oversimplifying. And West against East is actually a naive division, with Finland and Estonia probably on the other side only. And we talk about efficacy. Sadly, in the committee, there are greater interest in efficacy than self-concept. So they're moving using efficacy almost in the recent few cycles. And that's why we have lost some self-concept measurement. And you can see that the red dots are the achievement, the blue are the self-efficacy. You can see that the efficacy in a lot of Western are quite low. And the relation with the achievement actually is not high. Fear of failure. This is the most recent. Sorry. The fear of failure in the old days is always a negative thing. But now in the most recent volume, 2018, they talk about fear of failure could be a good thing in the sense that if students don't have any fear, probably they have low achievement. So this is yes.
Let me just throw one thing in. Our group did a study on the murky distinction between self-concept and self-efficacy, and self-efficacy is clearly more highly related to achievement than self-concept, than academic self-concept is. But when you have longitudinal data, self-efficacy doesn't predict any future achievement after you control for prior achievement. So it's more closely related to achievement, but it gives you almost nothing in terms of predicting future achievement.
So the additional information is not rich. Self-efficacy.
Yes. And you can't look at that in cross-sectional studies.
Yes, probably next time I should push it back in. but there's a general. So the way of doing it is first the ETS usually do a preliminary suggestion first. They do a very good solid literature review, and we can provide some literature for them. And so they have a tentative scheme, and we will sort of modify from that and start discussion from there. Yeah, we can push in some useful literature for them to consider. So fear of failure is more complicated issue in the recent trend. And then we also talk about failure date. So it's not one-sided, not totally interested. So even Finland talk about failure. And growth mindset is a very disappointing construct in the last cycle. So the research show, although we love to see a positive relation, but I think our conclusion generally is that the items are not working well enough. So we'll be assessing growth mindset again, 2021. And memorizing strategies usually is Western versus Asian are memorizing all things. But if you look at the PISA result, actually, who are using British student, Australian student, US student are memorizing a lot as well. And IT, I don't think it's not picked up enough, is that the IT, we find that use of IT at home and use of IT in school are actually positively related. But so Australia is a system that use IT in both at home and in school. And the sad thing is that in 2015, they published a report showing that all those countries using a lot of IT, actually their result drops in the last 15 years or 12 years.
They use it to play.
But not many people have picked up. I think the conclusion, you can have two conclusions here, is that the general trend, there are two, either the new tech is not help because our curriculum is still outdated, is the 18th century curriculum, or the way we're using the technology is just helping motivation. is not in-depth learning. So what you want is a good example, good whatever teaching method that help the real learning. So so that's why if you really look into things, there's stories telling you that school are putting banner outside their school telling that we are not using IT. and tellers, if you look at tellers, they are also interesting. So we believe projects are good. I'm talking to people who are working more in education. Projects are good, but you look at Finland is actually not using a lot of projects. Work that need more than one week to do. So public belief, a lot of good things that public belief. Finland, for example, is not doing a lot of good performance. If you want to change school, so we understand Finland have a group of very outstanding teachers. But actually, if you ask, do you want to change school? Do you want to be teacher in your next life? Do you recommend people to work in your school? Actually, Finland is just around that world average. So the implication is that in all high achieving economies, probably there's a price to pay. All teachers are not happy. So the interesting thing people have not picked up. And there are people here, you discovery-based instruction, everyone think that these are good, but Swella is someone you probably all Australian will know. So these are people actually challenging minimal guidance instruction does not work. So we should pick up a lot of this message from data that help us. And between school, across school variance, we also compare the variance. I think this is an interesting topic because some country, for example, Japan, the dark thing is the between school. They have huge between school variance, but in some like Finland, they have small between school variance, but they have huge within school variance, which means that no child left behind is not happening at all in this country. You have students who are doing very badly. And I'll jump over this, more mathematical, but I think most of you here are very quantitative. I don't know whether my judgment is correct. Under Herb, everyone are quantitative. So between this is I'm showing you 200 schools, and the red part is the parents. So 200 schools with the mother education level. You can find that the better school, the red on the left is the better performance school, and the right is the lower performance school. You can find that in a low performance school, the red with mother have high education is left. So there's a huge, what I'm showing you is around 20 to 30% of between school variance of the mother education. But in homework, actually all schools have similar kind of homework, irrespective of their academic. So I want to raise one issue. So these are the high between school variance. So the distribution within school is much smaller than the variance across school. The motivation, but a lot of psychological construct or questionnaire distribution is like this one. There's huge within school variance, but small between school variance. I'll show you some statistics in a minute. So this is from Google. You can see this is 20 school with ICC equals to 0.91. This is ICC 0.07. So the right-hand side panel shows there's little between school differences, but why differences within school? Okay, we'll look at the questionnaire. This is one typical within country or within city. So all these constructs are usually 1 to 10% between schools. So whenever we want to talk about school practices, it's difficult. So what are the the variable with high between school variance? These are the income, parents' educational level. The low one are the have you have a kindergarten education, do you have basic physical education, parents' care, motivation, all these have small between school variance. So if you want to make your school different from the other school, the thing you want is to unethically select your parents. Then your school will be different from other school. Hope you want to say something? Hope you want to know. Okay, these are the PISA result 2015. I think you can repeat the same thing. So the first column is B economy, between economy. The first left column. So you can see that and then the individual country columns are the between school variance. So you can see the ability, math, reading, science, and problem, you have huge, relatively larger between school variance in ability. So these are much larger. But for items, questionnaire item, you can see that the between school variance and the between country variance are really small. So we are explaining a small differences using variable, which is extremely difficult. Between economy and between school are very small on item. So this is a distribution. So the middle part is the between school variance of the questionnaire item, which are small. So we are sort of stuck there. So it's a multi-level kind. If you find that another problem is that I'm showing the mean of correlation and the correlation of mean differences. You can find that if you really calculate the 17,000 schools, the relation between achievement is actually high. So student doing high in one thing actually is doing high. At the country level, you are also find high relation. So achievement, you have high consistent relation at all three levels. But if you look at the relation with the achievement and the SES or other variable, you find totally different. So what I am pointing out, for example, is that for countries which are doing badly in their motivational construct, actually in their achievement, they are doing much better or better than the other country. So we are sort of stealing the concept from a student level concept and applying in the country. So because we find that at the student level, we have a strong positive relation between achievement and motivation. So for a country who have high achievement, you should work hard to improve your country motivation. But that's not the case. Actually, at country level, the relation can be negative. Okay, I'll stop here. Sorry about that. It's longer than expected. And whether we can have a few questions.
KT, one of the
Yes.
things that you didn't talk about that's a real interesting issue for TIMSS and PISA is that the age differences. So that PISA takes a constant age no matter what year in school, and TIMSS takes a constant year in school no matter what age. What are some of the implications of that?
So for country, actually, country like to do participate in both is that TIMSS provide you with data of primary school because you have grade 4. For most country, the PISA actually overlap with the TIMSS, the second level, because it's grade 4 and 8. Grade 4 and 8. So 8 overlap with grade 9 and grade 10, which is the model grade level for PISA. So that part is not interesting. So they're overlapping. But for primary school, you can only obtain data using TIMSS. But the major difference, I would say the major difference between TIMSS and PISA is that TIMSS measure curriculum, while PISA measure your future ability. I think that's the biggest difference.
I guess what I was talking about, KT, is the fact that in TIMSS, you always have students that are, every samples is the same year. Whereas when you're looking at PISA, you'll have 3 or 4 different year groups that are all 15 years old. And that makes a huge difference in terms of some of the analysis and some of the conclusions and stuff like that.
Yes.
Is there ongoing discussion on the relative strengths of those two different approaches?
No, I think PISA will still take on keep on 15 because there are huge variation across different countries on the education system. So they don't want to compare grade versus grade. I think this is age versus age may seem to them more solid and comparable. So 15 years is sort of you have been under an education system for a certain number of years. So there's never a topic in the strategic development group or in the PISA managers group, what they call the PGB, program director meetings. Is not an issue at all.
Okay.
But
has there been, K2, Rhonda here, has there been any discussion in meetings about whether to look at Indigenous populations globally with PISA to see the differences within country?
So actually some country use a huge sample. For example, Canada is a typical. Is that for some country they want to make use of that chance to assess more clearly on some some second level. So they pay extra money and they do extra work, and in addition to a country level sample, they can get they have enough sample size to talk about, for example, what you call indigenous people or different province. Usually it's by province, geographic, rather than, of course, you can do further analysis, selecting their background. And you can also add in a few questions yourself within your own data set administratively, if you want to do a sideline research. So these are the other things some countries are doing, but not too many. Just a few countries have this additional sample collected for their own countries. Otherwise, it's the basic one. Yeah.
Is there any registry of the things that different countries do and whether that data is accessible? I mean, PISA is wonderful in terms of providing the standard PISA data, but all these countries that are doing really interesting things, is that data generally available? I guess sometimes yes and sometimes no. Or is there even a registry of what it is the different countries are doing?
So practically, because you always have what we call national project manager, they have all additional data, but then eventually, slowly, so it's a raw data set, but slowly you conform to the universal data set, then it becomes the universally available data set. So everyone will have that data set. If you want individual country data set and they don't put in somewhere what they have done with their own data sets, but then you have to ask the individual country. It wouldn't be going through PISA, and you wouldn't have a list of things that different countries are doing with their own data sets. But there are more concern, like data privacy, even asking gender, asking boy and girl is not legitimate in certain countries. So you must provide enough options for them to choose. That kind of things are being discussed and difficult to handle. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, Kit.
Yeah, hi.
So in Australia, we have LSAY, Longitudinal Study of Australian Youth,
Yes,
which uses PISA as a first-time wave.
Yes.
It's a great data set. The problem is that going from the first wave, the PISA wave, to the second one, there's a massive drop. And the rationale that we've been given from the body that runs that survey is that a lack of support from the OECD for running that survey. Has there been any sort of thought about better supporting countries that want to do longitudinal stuff with PISA?
PISA, I understand there are some national project manager which repeat the PISA longitudinally. But even asking the same, unless you really do it very privately and you have sufficient technology, otherwise, even using PISA past items, because longitudinal, you probably want to have some item being repeatedly used in a certain number of years or in certain projects. Asking them to release or give you the items, cognitive ability item, is not easy because they don't want to. They're repeatedly using those items to anchor their future assessment. And even for the new domain, they don't have plan immediately on using it. For example, global competence. A lot of countries are interested in doing it in other research. Basically, if you want to give one simple answer, it is not allowed. So it is difficult. The only thing you can use is a questionnaire. You just cite your source because no one knows where the questionnaire comes from, and you can freely use their questionnaire items. But for the cognitive part, this is more tricky. Basically, you don't have access for, other than the release item, you don't have the access of the cognitive items.
Did I get at the question you were asking, Phil?
It was a very political answer. So.
Nice try.
But a good news is that now the chairman of the PGB, what we call Program Managing Board, is the board of director. So it's all OECD country, and Australia is an OECD country, and the chair lady is from Australia. She's the, I've forgotten the name. She's the Minister of Education in Australia, or former or current. So she's chairing the Program Managing Board. Yeah.
Other questions? Has KT given you some interesting thoughts about some secondary data analysis projects that you might want to pursue with PISA? Certainly very interesting to hear what's coming up in the future, but also some of the history.
Yes, and they are working on a vocational education soon. But the problem is that all these new developments, second language and all these new domain, they're interesting, but countries just opt in to participate. And often it is like 20. They start with a minimum, like 9 countries, at least 9 countries to participate, but then it turned out to be just 20 something, with 10 of them countries that you want to compare with. So the size is not good, and they will have the vocational education coming up very soon. Assessing students at the end of high school, around that age, how students are equipped with their vocational education. So these are the new topic coming up. Yeah, if you're interested.
Well, thank you very much, KT, and we'll follow up on some of the issues undoubtedly. But thank you very much for the expansive overview. Yeah.
Thank you. It's just a family gathering.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.